Welcome, everybody. We would really like to say that we're going to have a conversation, and we would enjoy and invite you to, have the conversation with us and ask us any question that you have on your hormones and how to nourish them and, have them optimally. But if we think about hormones from, through the lifespan and how we're born, we need to look at it from a biopsychosocial aspect. So biology, your genetics, and what you're predisposed with. And then, how that's nourished, particularly over the first 300 days of a child's life. And then after that, we move forward into behavior and psychology and your innate psychology that you're born with, but how that's nurtured for learned behaviors within the home. And that's where, habits and nutrition and movement and lifestyle factors can really affect how your hormones are nourished. And then moving forward to that, we've got the social. So if you think about children moving into schools, if you think about social media, if you think about, joining social groups, whether it's, a CrossFit or gymnastics or dance or, high intensity sport or anything like that, and you kind of get focused into certain behaviors socially that can, really affect how your hormones react to that. As well as a female being, with the menstrual cycle, and then moving forward into pregnancy and peri and post-menopause. There's so many layers to it. So let's talk about, I suppose, Maya, where you come from a sports perspective. What have you seen, and what, is very aware to you right now that you want women to take away today?
So obviously we're all coming from quite different angles. You focus a little bit more on menopausal women, Beth as well. From my perspective, I'm working with a lot of women that are in performance sport, and a really big issue, one that affects women's hormonal function and hormonal health the most, is they call it the female athlete triad, our REDS. So a very low energy availability. So women in sport who are not fueling adequately, not even eating close to their energy demands for sport. And unfortunately, this is a problem that we see a lot more in women rather than men, and a lot more as well in endurance-based sports where their energy output is so high that they're sort of unable to meet those energy demands. And I suppose the risks that come with that, in addition to low energy availability, is menstrual dysfunction, so the loss of their menstrual cycle, the loss of their period, which really comes, I suppose, when the body is really, it's almost like reproductive health becomes a bit of a luxury. The body is so underfueled and so undernourished to the point where it sort of just has to stay alive. So that menstrual cycle becomes irregular, which, causes a whole plethora of different issues from, low bone mineral density all the way through to, everything else that comes with that, to be honest. Fertility issues, iron deficiency, that's more related to REDS and things like that. But we were talking earlier, I suppose, about why that is so common in women, and how we can kind of help manage that and help women in sport not only perform well, but also look after their health, not only for the short term, but for their entire sort of lifespan. And I suppose the main thing is that women are under so much more pressure, I suppose, when it comes to body image, when it comes to diet culture and all of the messaging that comes with that. So actually being a female athlete is incredibly difficult, not only to fuel adequately, but to manage all of those pressures that come with that. Anything to jump in on there? I know that's quite a lot to be discussing.
I think, can you guys hear me kind of at the back? Okay, great. Thanks, Brad. I work with predominantly women throughout the ages, so from even young adolescent kids all the way up through to women in menopause. And I look at it from a functional medicine / nutrition perspective. What does that mean? That means I look at everything that they're doing that we can put together to give optimal health. So someone might come to me for fat loss, someone might come to me to sleep better, someone might come to me to help them manage stress. But you can't look at any one of those things in isolation. You have to look at everything collectively to achieve an end result. So I think my biggest takeaway that I'd love everyone to take from today, if you want happy hormones, you can't just look at the hormones. You need to look at your sleep, how you're managing your stress, the food that you're taking, your social interactions, your work interactions. So it's very much a holistic approach, I think, for optimal hormone health.
Yeah, well, I'll round the Reds chat off in terms of management. Is that a good step to take? So yeah, I mean, realistically, like you said, it all comes down to education and looking at that sort of big picture, all the way through from sort of short term to thinking about how, you know, your present implications and diet are going to affect you across the lifespan. So education is super, super key. I'll pass you over to Lisa. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I suppose when I've been lucky enough to work with athletes for the last, I would say, 18 years. And one of the things that, you know, has come to, you know, has been present is the stress that exercise can have on the body, as well as, you know, recognizing how important recovery is. And a lot of athletes, you know, just want to do. And unfortunately, you know, recovery is probably the most important aspect of, you know, athletic performance. And if you think about, you know, I suppose I'm looking at it from an elite perspective where that's their job. So they have the luxury of having, you know, recovery during the day, and having somebody on site to adequately fuel them for that. But if you think about somebody like all the women here today from an age group perspective, or from somebody who wants to stay fit and do strength training across the lifespan, they're trying to fit that in along with work commitments and stress commitments from work. They're trying to fit that in from family commitments, maybe, you know, even having children during all of that and the recovery of that. And there's a lot of pressure on them. And unfortunately, our hormones then get halted because of stress, lack of sleep, insomnia, and then it's like that vicious cycle where you eat to survive, and you still want to do the training because that's what you really enjoy, but then that adds more pressure on your hormones, and then you get, you know, out of whack, like we were chatting about this morning, about the thinning of the hair, the bloatedness, and then that, unfortunately, long term, really restricts how strong you are in the latter stage of life. And we're not just talking about living longer, we're talking about, you know, the health span. How are you going to be more healthy longer in life? And how can you put things in place at this stage and even younger in order to nourish your hormones and protect your bones, your heart, and your brain.
I think, I mean, we were talking about this earlier. We cover, you know, a little bit of an age range. I'm in my 20s. And I was saying that, you know, a lot of my friends, we're focused very much on the present. If we're surviving and we can train and we're getting praise for having a lean athletic physique, then, you know, that's all well and good. But it's very hard. And I guess what I want other young women to understand is we have to consider our health later in life as well. Like, yeah, it's all well and good feeling good and getting praise for being lean or whatever, but if you don't have a you know, regular menstrual cycle, you know, you will have to deal with those ramifications later on in life, and we need to be thinking now how we can be fit and strong, you know, later in life as well, in regard to bone health, fertility, all of those things that aren't like the sexiest things to think about now. But I think, you know, retrospect is a wonderful thing when you have poor bone health in your 50s and you wish that when you were younger someone educated you on, you know, that eating enough was incredibly important, and looking after, your hormone function and having a regular cycle and all of those things that perhaps, with the gift of hindsight appear a little bit more important, I suppose. But also one more point would be that we're also incredibly empathetic towards women and all the pressures that we're under. And we really understand with a lot of the messaging that we receive that it's hard to think about all of those things and not be under so much pressure to look a certain way or put other things perhaps in front of physical health or hormonal health because of, you know, the praise that you get in achieving a certain physique, or, you know, even things like overtraining can become a little bit glorified. Like, you're so dedicated, you're so passionate. Well, you've also got no period and you feel like shit. So, you know, we've got to be, you know, a little bit more balanced when it comes to that.
So Beth, if we think of the big six, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, thyroid, and insulin, from a functional medical perspective, how do we nourish them to ensure that they're optimal for long-term health?
There are multiple ways, and as I mentioned earlier, they work holistically together. So if we start with sleep, for example, when we don't sleep well, our cortisol levels will typically remain high for the whole day. So that's our stress hormone. Normally we want it high, come down low. If we don't sleep well, it messes up our circadian rhythm, so our natural sleep-wake cycle, which drives when hormones should be released. So already hormonally we're on, you know, an uneven kilter for the rest of the day. It affects our insulin levels, so we're less able to manage carbohydrates. It affects our hunger hormones, meaning we're more likely to feel hungrier and less likely to feel full. We release less growth hormone if we don't sleep well. And the list kind of goes on and on and on, and that's just sleep. So if you take nothing away but this, if you can improve your sleep, the quality and the length of time you're asleep, you will improve your optimal overall hormone health. And there's even statistics that show if you sleep irregularly, you diminish your biological age by 4 years. So, you know, that's something for us all
That's
to
why you
have
look 21.
That's why she looks 21. So that's sleep. If we're talking about another key driver for optimal hormone health, it's nutrition. How are our hormones made? They are made predominantly, when you're talking about the steroid hormones, from fats. How many people here have gone on a low-fat diet at one stage in their life, right? It's the first thing we cut out, and yet that's exactly what our hormones are made from, in particular the steroid hormones. So I'm not encouraging you to go out and eat, you know, unhealthy fats, but, you know, olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, all of this good stuff. In addition to which, fats form the outside of our cells. They are literally what our cells are made of. So, yeah, I think those are just a couple of key areas that I would focus on.
What I would add in addition to that is your perspective on what is health.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fats are so important, and your carbohydrate intake is so important. So going on crazy keto diets as a woman is not going to be beneficial for your health unless you have possibly epilepsy, okay? So fiber is the number one carbohydrate that should be on everybody's plate. And, you know, on average, we're supposed to take on 30 grams of fiber per day, but actually a study done shows that most people take on 18 grams or less because they're on low carbohydrate diets. Now, that doesn't mean that you go out and eat bagels and muffins and, you know, plates of rice and whatever. It means that you focus on possibly, you know, one meal a day is a plant-based meal where you have maybe chickpeas or lentils or beans, as well as, you know, whole grains and whole foods. And I know it's easier said than done, but those small little changes on your plate are so beneficial to your gut health, the production of hormones that make you feel good, like serotonin. So 95% of our happy hormone, serotonin, is produced in our gut. But if you're not eating fiber and you're not nourishing that, well, you're not going to feel good. So it leads to mood disorders, which is very common in this day, really. So that's really important. And then protein is another factor which is really important in the production of hormones. And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and take 3 shakes a day or eat lots of meat, but it means that you have a source of protein at each meal, that you have a variety of protein. You don't just eat the one type all the time. So it's really important that you have that variety as well, because variety is the spice of life, and we should all enjoy what we're eating. So if you do eat fish, if you do eat meat, do enjoy that 2 or 3, 4 times a week. But then try and add some plant-based proteins in as well. I would add that.
I really like the fact you mentioned carbohydrates, because perhaps you want to talk about how carbohydrates. We were talking about this earlier: tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin, that whole waterfall.
Yeah, so the fibers and the carbohydrates that you eat, along with the proteins, like no one source of fuel works on its own to produce your hormones, okay? It's really important that you get that overall balance. So it is important to, have a certain level of carbohydrates, whether that be 2 grams, 3 grams a day if you're on a low carb diet, or if you are exercising, which most of you here today are, you do need to ramp that up a little bit to 4 and 5, depending on the level of training that you're doing. And that helps to make tryptophan and serotonin, and these are precursors for melatonin, which helps you sleep and get a good night's sleep. So, just being able to have the basics right, rather than feeling like you need that next fad diet, is really important. But that's where we come back into the biopsychosocial loop. Is social media today is heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because there's so much misinformation out there that is really detrimental to people's health. Intermittent fasting is good for your health at a certain level, particularly for a woman. Intermittent fasting is anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. So if you've never done it before, start with 12. And to me, that's not fasting. That should just be a normal lifestyle habit. You don't need food after your dinner before your breakfast, unless you're having a very active sex life and you need the energy, yeah? So 12 hours should be anybody's level of fasting. For a woman, particularly in midlife and beyond, where your protein needs and your fiber needs are so important for gut health, keeping you feeling sane, reducing brain fog, but also your protein for strengthening your bones, keeping your muscle mass, and preventing sarcopenia. You need to be able to get that amount of calories in. If you're fasting, if you're only eating for 8 hours, the likelihood of you getting all of that nutrition in for just general health is not going to be there. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. Go on, Maya.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm in total agreement. I think it's unfortunate that a kind of well-balanced, consistent diet is probably the most kind of unappealing thing to try and market and sell. Everyone's always looking for that one solution or that one thing that they can do that's kind of going to solve all their problems, or result in fat loss, or result in weight loss, or something that they do for 8 weeks. And unfortunately, it does tend to be, I'll go low carbohydrate, or I'll cut out fats, or, I'll only eat 2 meals a day. There's massive amounts of problems and implications on your hormones with doing any of those 3 things. If you cut out carbohydrates, you're cutting out fiber. You're missing out on, all of those health promoting kind of benefits. If you cut out fats, hormone function will be impaired. If we only consume 2 meals a day, there's absolutely no chance you're going to get anywhere close to your protein needs, your fiber needs, even your energy needs, even if fat loss is the goal. So, realistically, building a very well-structured, well-balanced diet with a little bit of everything, which again, people don't really like to hear, because it doesn't sound very exciting. When I tell my clients, we're going to have 3 meals a day, 1 snack, we're going to have a good balance of protein, carbohydrates, healthy fats, fruits and vegetables, you're going to drink a little bit more water, get a few more steps in, they're like, so-and-so told me that I could go low carb and lose 6 kilos in a month. It's like, well, we've got to tick all those boxes.
No, I was just going to say, it's not sexy, is it? It's not sexy to eat a well-balanced diet. Like, all of us like something new. We like the new keto diet. We like the new low-carb diet. We like the paleo diet. And we all kind of, not all of us, many of us jump onto the bandwagon of thinking this is going to be what is going to save me, or what's going to get me my results. But in actual fact, just simplicity. Like, every time you have a meal, do you have some healthy protein on there? Do you have some healthy vegetables? Do you have some healthy fats? Like just small, and it doesn't need to be changes you make overnight. I'm a big believer in small and steady wins the race. Small micro changes each and every day add up to big changes. So, if you go away from this and you have a little bit more protein or some more fiber in your meal, then that's already changes that will, take you forwards to being healthier, I think.
And I suppose if we think about, how do you know if your hormones aren't working well? Yeah. So some of the symptoms that you will recognize are irregular periods, menstrual cycles. That means your hormones are not functioning optimally. Sometimes you may get thinning of the hair. Sometimes you may get really dry, flaky skin. You may get more irritable and have mood disorders. You may have bloatedness. You may get tired and fatigued more often. So these are all signs during your maybe 20s and 30s of irregular hormones. And then in your 40s, when you are experiencing irregular hormone or irregular cycles because of just general life moving through perimenopause to menopause, then how do you help yourself feel better and become more aware of that as well and strengthen all of those things?
And maybe just to add on, so the men here don't feel completely left out. Like, hormones apply to men as much as they do to women. And we talk from a women's perspective because we are women, but we also all work with men. And, a key indicator of not being optimally hormonally healthy is when you start to feel like your testosterone drops. And that could be shown through lack of motivation, lack of libido. And so men are just as impacted by poor sleep, poor nutrition, poor lifestyle. So we all need to be thinking about that from every angle, I think.
And I suppose from an athletic perspective, if your hormones aren't functioning optimally, you may be more prone to injury. You may be more prone to insomnia, and you may be more prone to immunosuppressed, bouts in the year where you get more colds, you can't train well, and that's going to really affect how you're performing throughout the season as well. We don't have a lot of time left, so we've got like 5 minutes. Would anybody have any questions that is, really outstanding that they want answered? So I think from, I suppose, my perspective, moving away from today, what you can take away is, our health for me is like a pyramid. You've got to get the basics right. And the basics are a rounded plate with protein, fiber, and fats. So every time you sit down to eat, think, where is my protein? Where is my fiber? And can you have 2 colors on your plate every time you eat? And a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. That's pretty cool. Or nuts and seeds or anything like that. The second thing is, like Beth has talked about in detail, is your sleep. And that is a huge behavioral factor on hormone health. And then movement, so whether that's under moving or over moving, they can both add stress on your life. So that's very individual. And then other things are managing your stress level. So whether that's in the home, relationships, at work, and high intensity levels of exercise can really cause stress on the body. So be mindful of how you manage your stress and what you put into place to manage your stress. And they're kind of the basics for me.
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of, from an athletic sort of perspective, myself and Lisa were talking earlier about sort of the pyramid being sort of the wrong way around. So people tend to focus more on the minors rather than focusing on sort of the most important focus points. So they're looking at supplementation, they're looking at, all those little extras rather than focusing on the base of the pyramid, which is just simply eating enough. So eating enough to meet the demands of training. If you're not doing that, then fundamentally there's absolutely no point you looking
at... And eating enough of the right foods.
Exactly. Oh, Jesus. But in terms of hormonal health, particularly for women, the most important thing is education and making sure that you are eating enough to not only fuel athletic performance, but also to support your health at the same time. And the female athletes that I've worked with previously are under a lot of pressure to, particularly in sports where you're not wearing a lot of clothes, maybe gymnastics, dance, whatever, they're under quite a lot of pressure to maintain, a lean athletic physique, and also feel quite self-conscious eating a lot of food, which often you have to if you are a, busy athlete or an elite level athlete. So yeah, that becomes a little bit of an issue as well.
I think maybe I can just wrap up with a couple of final thoughts, which is every decision you make relating to your health and wellness, think for the long term, not the short term. Will this choice today just make me feel good now, or will it help further my longevity and my ultimate end health goals? And I think that's something that I have to remind myself every single day. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
We are living longer. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
about the lifespan, it's about the health span.
And I think if I could add one more thing in, it would be if you can't, implement a habit for, longer than a month or 2 months, like don't do it. Don't hop on something then hop off it. Hop on something then hop off it. Stop looking for a sort of short-term solution and start taking, I suppose, more of an inclusion-based approach, which is what can I kind of bring into my life or diet that I can maintain for months, years to come. And yeah, I think we're all sort of aligned with that sort of approach. Girl power.
Thank you so much, Lisa, Maya, and Beth. It's a very good reminder, even for myself, to not just look at all of the information out there, maybe just on Google or Instagram, on fad diets, and sometimes forgetting just some very simple and easy to do foundational tips that actually is better for our long-term goals. So thank you so much for the reminder. And I just want to take this opportunity to mention that this talk is sponsored by Soup. We have a booth at C27 and C29 if you guys are interested to know more.